Look at this big dog.
Wow, it's huge and slobbering.
Achoo! Well, there we are. Certainly, this is a wonderful panel to end this incredible summit on. And I am very grateful to Jared Elliott and Wes LaPorte and Evan Price for basically heading this next discussion, because I do think that we've all heard about the importance of UV, and now this is to learn about the truth and the facts behind it. So with that, Jared, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, Ransel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first of all, on behalf of Wes, Evan, and I, really our entire company, we're just honored to be here, you know, coming into this, and really we'll get to our reasons for being here as Ransel sort of summarized, but we're just incredibly grateful. And one thing that's really important for us to say is that whether you're a medical provider on here or somebody that's a supportive person, you know, this year's been a little bit crazy, right? We can all admit. And I go back to the Tom Cruise movie, A Few Good Men, and really for all of you, it's an appreciation for you to stand on that wall and say that no one's going to hurt you tonight, if you remember that quote. And so we're just incredibly grateful for all of you, and then certainly for those that we interact with directly in the U.S. and throughout the world. So I have the honor of moderating our session, and I want to introduce Wes and Evan real quick. I'll share a couple thoughts, but ultimately today our goal is to speak to problems, solutions, and impact in this area. So on our panel is Wesley LaPorte. So Wes is the CEO and founder of PhoneSoap. I'll let him, share a little bit more on his story very soon. And then I'm also joined by Evan Price, who's our director of engineering. We're all grateful to be here. You saw the video, right? That's a little fun. We kind of wanted to share a little bit about who we are. And then, even as we move more into the professional space, but ultimately, why are we here? And so as Ransel mentioned, and really, I've garnered so much insight the last couple of days on the webinar, in the talks between transformation of healthcare, digital, and really what that's defined differently in different realms. But everybody's seeking new solutions to solve these new problems. COVID-19 has been an awakening. I remember Dr. Hashmi talked about there was strategy with some of the things she was doing at NEOM, and now COVID-19 has really pushed them to full on implementation because a lot of the strategy was validated. So we're here because we're a fusion of all of that. Infection prevention probably has always been, but it's certainly in 2020, it has to become everybody's business. And that has to remain for the rest of time. And so that fusion of digital, whether it be therapeutics, technology, one of these, which we all have, and increasingly throughout the world, and then you add in the infection prevention component of that, that's kind of why we're here. UV has had a lot of interest this year, and we're just here to speak the truth and share some of the use cases. This isn't, meant to be a commercial, but really just provide value, as many of you cited through the last couple of days. You're looking for collaboration. So, without further ado, I just want to get into some of our topics. And, ultimately, when you look at whether it's the clinical trial and digital work that was just mentioned in the last panel, whether it was, folks in the UAE talking about 208% of the population has a mobile subscription, 116%, I think in Saudi Arabia, they noted these devices are everywhere. And ultimately, I'll kick it to Wes to really speak to the journey that he started about 10 years ago, where the implementation of these devices also brings some problems, really in the land of unintended consequences. And so Wes, I'll kick it to you at kind of how you started all of this, and really we're out in front of device hygiene and that sort of thing.
Yep. Thanks, Jared. So yeah, like Jared mentioned, we started this journey, more than a decade ago. I was doing cancer immunology research in 2008 2009. I think that the iPhone, as we know it, was only a couple years old. So it's hard to think that it's been that long. But that's when we started PhoneSoap, and it started as a combination of two things coming together. One is this heightened awareness of how we're using phones and how they could potentially become a breeding ground for bacteria. And so there was a couple articles circa 2009 that spoke to the fact that the average cell phone was 18 times dirtier than a public restroom, or one in 5 phones was found with fecal matter on it. And it was those kind of articles at the time that really were like kind of surprising. And we saw that as a problem, obviously, that a few people were paying attention to, and it made an interesting news article. But obviously, if as you look at how phone use has evolved since then, like if anything, we touch our phones more often every day, and we bring them into more places and use them more often than ever. And so, but at the time, that was the problem that presented itself. And the obvious solution, as is the obvious solution with disinfection in general, we've been using, when we think of disinfection, we think of using chemical cleaners, which work very well, but do have to be, applied properly. And, different surfaces and different objects actually have, behave differently when they interact with these chemical cleaners. And so, we wanted to, do it in a different way. And one of the ways that we were disinfecting surfaces in the lab, in our immunology lab, was just in our hood. We used UV light to keep the surface disinfected. Ran it overnight when we were outside of the lab, and so I knew about UV. Obviously, it had been used long before 2009, but definitely intrigued by its effectiveness and the possible application in other non-clinical areas. And so that's really the foundation of PhoneSoap. And we decided to focus on phones, obviously, as kind of this third hand that you never wash. Everyone has good hand hygiene, and the phone's just kind of forgotten about. And so for those of you that don't know, PhoneSoap uses UV light and to disinfect phones while they charge. And one of the things that helped PhoneSoap be successful was that we married the disinfection of the device to a habit that people already have. And I think that's, an important thing to point out, especially as we apply this technology in different ways moving forward. But, the only time that people really weren't using their phones was when they when they were asleep, basically, or when they were charging. And so, PhoneSoap was born, and it allowed someone to, charge their phone as they normally would and wake up and have their phone disinfected as well. So really the rest is history there. But, the principles there are as we want people, as we talk about, disinfecting anything really, from, our hands to different objects, to different surfaces, to air, there has to be this opportunity where it's convenient for people. And, back in 2009, that was, the convenience of charging your phone. And now in 2020, especially, the process of disinfecting your phone, marrying that to another important habit, which is washing your hands. And that's, we've got more devices now, and one of them is focused around the marriage of hand hygiene and phone hygiene, and doing that at the same time. And so, it's been a 10-year journey for us, applying UV in different situations, focused primarily on phones, but as you saw in kind of our teaser video, applying that to air disinfection and not just UV in the typical way that we think about it at 254 nanometers, but different pathogens behave differently to different wavelengths. So combining wavelengths for greater effectiveness and things of that nature. But we're very excited as a company about applied UV, both new technology that we've developed in the UV space, but also combining that with software to be something that organizations can use to keep track of what was disinfected and when. So that's just a little bit of background about where we're coming from, the experience that our perspective.
Yeah, and building on that, and certainly a lot of things, even the past couple of days, but really throughout this year, is first of all, we don't make any medical claims. We're really about the reduction of pathogens of all types tied to the effectiveness of UVC, and we'll get into some of the specifics because we get asked questions a lot as people hear about UVC. Hey, how does it work? And that, which we'll go into a little more technical detail just to help be part of the education. But it's really about reducing as best as possible infectious or loading dose with UV as an adjunct to other things that you might do. The interesting thing about this pandemic is you've just gotten more and more push to cell phones, and not just the things that have been discussed the last couple of days with a Dr. Neom app at home, Dr. Hashmi spoke of, and you look at telehealth. Frankly, last night my kid is unfortunately part of a contact tracing, so we're on a cell phone doing telemedicine with an urgent care provider, where the simplicity of that really allows that reach and allows a global audience to get more access to healthcare. We talked about a number of the benefits and some of the challenges still working through with telehealth, but ultimately, as more and more people get phones in their hands, these unintended consequences, as we spoke to, are really important. Contactless, touchless payments, all these things just push more and more device use. And so what we want to do now is, we'll weave in some healthcare messaging and want to get into some more technical stuff. We've gotten a lot of questions throughout the healthcare realm on solutions for NICUs outside of putting a phone in a Ziploc bag. And we've seen JACO in the US, who monitors hand hygiene, right? Actually have a hand hygiene app to make sure that people are compliant. And then we've heard tons of things the last couple of days, but really, how does it all work? And so what we want to move to now is really being more mindful of when you're looking at UVC light in general, right? Not necessarily PhoneSoap, but could be anything, is just to be aware of a few things. And what I want to do is, Wes already highlighted why originally the consumer was important, because we were targeting a habit of charging their phone that they already did, and then the awareness and education of the need to disinfect devices emerged, and then the marrying of the two happened. As we move into healthcare, it's all that more important, because as more of these devices penetrate into hospitals and clinics and into the communities and are utilized as means for better communication, better clinical outcomes, the consumer at the center of it, right? And in this case, a patient, it's important to just make sure that if you are going to implement a solution in the spirit of infection prevention, that it works effectively. And so there are differences in UV light. And I want to kick it to Evan just to give a little background on the UV spectrum, talk about wavelengths and that sort of thing, just because throughout the world, many of you are looking at these things, and we just want to provide a little education here on that topic. So Evan, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Can you hear me? Just making sure my mic is on here.
Yep.
All right, good. So this is really important. And while I'm speaking to a very educated audience here, especially, the people that we market to in general are not you. I mean, these are just general consumers. They don't really have a specific need to understand everything that there is to understand about disinfection. And so that's what we're trying to bridge. We're trying to bridge that gap. And so while it's the UV that we focus on is the UVC spectrum. And now it's kind of common that we'll get customers who call in and be like, well, why can't I just take my phone into a tanning bed with me? Or why can't I just stick my phone out in the sun? And that's what we're here to kind of provide that education of, because when you look at it, the UVC or the UV spectrum in general is almost just as broad as the visual light spectrum. And when you look at that, our eyes can tell the different varieties in that visual light spectrum, but unfortunately we can't see that UV spectrum. And so we're kind of blind to exactly what's going on with our products. And so that puts a lot of impetus on us to make sure that we back up the claims that we make, to make sure that we do our due diligence in terms of sanitizing devices, in terms of the claims that we make to our consumers and to our customers. And when I think about this, when I think of UV light, I like to explain this to customers in that if you've ever seen the movie Lion King, there's this part in there where the dad is explaining to the son that we rule this kingdom wherever the light touches. And that's what UVC is. That's really what it is. The only thing we can disinfect is where that light touches. And so when we look at the spectrum of UVC that we're using, one, we have to focus on that 254 nan or the 200 to the 280 nanometer range. But even within that, we have to focus on those wavelengths that really do the most effect and most harm to the bacteria that we're looking to disinfect. And so we, like Wes mentioned, we really focus on that 254 nanometer wavelength. But I promise you, we are fully aware that there are other wavelengths out there like 222. And there's also a huge push towards UVC LEDs, which are able to more focus around 265 nanometer, which is kind of the peak of effectiveness for UVC light. The reason that we use 254 is a lot because of efficiency. What we are tasked to doing, which a lot of other industries don't have to do, is that we have to package this power into a very small package to make sure that it's convenient for the consumer, to make sure that it's on their desktop, and to make sure that we are able to teach the user to use it in the correct way. And so one thing that Wes did really well with this company when he started is he did a lot of research. And at the time, he wasn't as technical as he is now. And so a lot of that research was trial and error in terms of making sure that, okay, I have this device. I don't know if it's going to be completely disinfected. So we have to send this to a lab with each iteration of the product, which is a very expensive process. And kudos to us for making that that investment, because we've seen the dividends of that now. But what we're able to do now that with our engineering team here at PhoneSoap, is we're actually able to use sophisticated analysis tools for ray tracing that can specifically target 254 or any other wavelength that we choose to use in the future. And we're able to see if we can disinfect those devices in a 360-degree view. Now, this is really important because one thing that Jared says when I'm in a lot of sales calls with him, and I think is very, very apt in this discussion, is that when you wash your hands, you want to wash all 10 fingers. You don't just want to wash 9. And so devices out there on the markets need to make sure that they're cleaning the entire phone. Now, once COVID-19 hit, I think there were a lot of companies that really took that leap into this market that we have been in for many years. But when you look at their product, you can see that they're not exactly thinking through the things that they need to think through. For instance, initially Walmart was selling a product that was focused around 410 nanometers, which we know that it doesn't necessarily disinfect, and in some cases can actually reactivate bacteria that had previously been rendered inert. And so that device, in essence, was doing more harm than good. And you also see other devices that are out there on the market today, which don't make sure that they are cleaning the entire device. For instance, they'll be setting their device on a non-UV transparent surface, or they will be setting their device in a chamber that is not able to reflect UV in the correct way to clean all the areas of that phone. So this is our big focus. This is where we come in, making sure that we provide that technology in a basically a non-fail way. We're able to make sure that our customers clean their device properly every single time. Whereas if you use wipes, there is room for user error. And our purpose is to eliminate that user error as much as possible.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Yeah. And so when we look at healthcare, moving from the consumer and now into healthcare, whether it be utilization of devices of all types, wearables, et cetera, in healthcare, you're talking about populations that then become increasingly vulnerable, whether it's somebody in the long-term care, somebody in an ICU, somebody in a clinic. And so with that, the critical nature of the things that Evan and Wes have both mentioned on the integrity of the science built into any devices. And so we're really here to provide the education on the evaluation of UVC as you look towards that offering in your infection prevention bundle. And so Evan talked a little bit about 360 degrees. Wes, I don't know if you want to add anything else as a hallmark of certainly the PhoneSoap product, but really what everybody should demand as they evaluate any sort of UVC solution. Do you want to add anything else that we hadn't covered, or I can move to the next topic too?
I'll just emphasize the kind of the last point that he made, which was, what we're trying to do with chemical cleaners. There's a lot of user error that we find. Different chemicals behave in different ways, and the user isn't necessarily educated about the dwell time that's needed or the mechanism by which the chemical, disinfects. And so a lot of times, chemicals get applied and removed too quickly, or the device, the chemical gets applied and it's used again too quickly, or the chemicals applied too quickly, and there's some surfaces that don't get disinfected. And so the emphasis, one of the advantages of UVC is I like Evan's analogy to the Lion King, but this 360 degree disinfection to eliminate the possibility for user error, and using technology to actually see and to calculate what the surfaces that are being disinfected, and knowing to what degree they're being disinfected, and having that confidence that when you put, a device into, our product, that you get this 360 degree disinfection, that it's consistent every time. And so as we look at UV, as it's applied, more broadly, it's this understanding of how to properly apply it, and that takes a lot of effort actually to do it properly. And it's really important, because that is one of the main benefits is that consistency, not just the efficacy, but the consistency and the ease of use that will help with compliance. And obviously, the more that people are using these type of products, the more effective they are in general.
Great. And the other thing that we encourage all of you to do, we want to leave some time at the end for some Q&A, but we're always interested, whether it be prior to COVID or even now, when there's so much talk on digital transformation, and that means something to different people. But whether it be in the chat or Q&A now, we're always interested in the types of devices that are deployed throughout any of the healthcare institutions. We showed a video of our consumer products, but the one thing to be mindful of is in the background where Evan's at is really a move to the professional space. And I think part of why we're on this panel as well, or in the summit, is really to learn from all of you, because there are things that are out there where you have potentially unmet needs that you're increasingly recognizing in healthcare as you embed handheld devices into protocols that, of course, need to be disinfected, is really to learn from all of you as well. So it's taking the expertise that we have for at least a decade in UVC, and then working to tailor it to an emerging healthcare environment that's going to have increasing needs. And so we look forward to, collaborating with any of you. There's a lot of talk about collaboration the last couple of days. We look forward to that same thing, even if it's just to provide guidance and education, as we hope to do today. A couple of other things about our devices in general, and we think that you should hold any UVC technology you're going to evaluate to the same standard. Is really, you can't test every single pathogen with third-party labs, and we've done tons of that. We really try to be guided by the EPA and the EPA's concept of emerging pathogens, where you really try to certainly test the most relevant to the scenario you're dealing with, but also to challenge, your devices against C. difficile and against MRSA and against some of these, enveloped and non-enveloped viruses that are out there, so that not only can you provide 360-degree efficacy, but when you look at dose, each pathogen is different. And so UVC light will require a different dose for each pathogen. And the one thing I would ask, I guess, Evan, is just to maybe share, just when people talk about dose and not getting into doses on specific pathogens, but, for the individuals out there who might see the recording, what are some important considerations when you're just trying to get to any effective dose of UV? Could you just speak to a couple of the hallmarks on what is dose based on and what are some important things to just consider?
Yeah, definitely, Jared. So what we look at for dosage is really making sure we have the right irradiance of light that we're using. And so we have special devices that are able to measure the exact irradiance of the light sources that we use. And by exposing for a certain amount of time, you can calculate the specific dosage that you're targeting on different pathogens. And now the other thing that's really important to consider is that not all pathogens require the same amount of dosage for the same amount of kill. I mean, you mentioned C. diff and MRSA, and what will get you 3 log reduction on C. diff will get you 5 or 6 log reduction on MRSA. And what will get you 3 log reduction on Salmonella will get you 6 log reduction on E. coli. I mean, there's a lot of different considerations to make, especially in healthcare settings where there may be different protocols set in place in these healthcare environments that require you to adhere to more stringent guidelines than in others. And so what we need to be considerate of in our product development is making sure that we address all of those guidelines. And so for hospitals or for healthcare facilities that are targeting that C. diff, then we need to provide a device that can do that. And in healthcare, with our MedPro device, what we're able to do is, right now it's app enabled, where you can actually log into the app and you can set the time based on the pathogen that you're looking to destroy. I mean, if you don't have any concern over C. diff for the type of patients that you're treating, then maybe all you need is a 15-second disinfection cycle to get to 3-4 log reduction on MRSA. Or maybe you need that 6 log reduction and you can set that to 30 seconds. And maybe you want that 4 or 5 log reduction on C. diff so you can make that cycle a 1 or 2 minute cycle. And so this is what we really focus on, is making sure that we are in the know of the dosage that it requires to kill specific pathogens, so that we are educated in our conversations with doctors and with healthcare professionals, so that we provide the best solution possible.
Great. Thank you, Evan. I'm gonna address a question from Dr. Davis in the chat that feeds into some of the topics just discussed. But really, what has been the greatest challenge technically to designing highly effective products, and what is the quality edge of PhoneSoap versus, say, knockoff products? Was a question. I don't know if Wes or Evan want to take that one, and then we'll move to more of a safety discussion.
Sure. So we mentioned it, we alluded to it previously. The greatest challenge, it's a couple of factors. The greatest challenge for us is to first and foremost make a product that is efficacious, and that really involves a couple things. One is making sure that the object that's placed in our devices gets a 360-degree disinfection. And that's done by using, not just the proper dosing, as Evan said, but a combination of important materials that both allow UV light to be transmitted around the phone. Obviously, UVC doesn't transmit through things that look optically transparent. There's very specific materials that allow the correct wavelength of light to be transmitted. And so using those materials to suspend the object in a way that it can get a 360-degree dosing. Also, the reflectivity and the shape of the chamber. Evan mentioned, computer simulations that we've developed to to be able to design our products in a way that get that 360-degree disinfection. And so that's part modeling and part, using materials that are reflective to the wavelength of light that is that's killing the germs. In a similar way, we may look at chrome and think, wow, that's a pretty reflective surface, and it is on the visuals side of things. But when it comes to, the wavelength of light that's actually killing the germs, that wouldn't be a material that we would use. It's not effective at reflecting that specific wavelength of light. So, technically, it's combining, the correct materials, the correct dosing, and then, in our applications, when you look at UV products that are very effective versus ones that aren't, kind of exclude those. But UV products that are very effective are also typically very large. And Evan and team has done a good job of basically, shrinking the ballast and the driver for these products in a way that allows them to be in consumer devices, or to be in our pro devices, in a very small package that allows them to be deployed easily, and therefore, have, be more ubiquitous in a facility. So that's a technical design challenge that we've taken on, and allowed our products to be a lot smaller. Since the transition for general lighting into LEDs, there really hasn't been a lot of, there's been an abandonment of, ballast development for CCFLs, which we use. And so, that's something that we've had to kind of rethink and recreate at PhoneSoap. So there's been several technical challenges that, in combination, solving those challenges allows us to produce devices that are, very effective and accomplish our goals of being, small in size, convenient to deploy, convenient to use, and then most importantly, being both effective and consistent in disinfecting 360 degrees, basically the same way every time. And knockoff products, if you just by looking at them, there's been a lot of them this year, but if once you're kind of familiar with UV and how it works, you can kind of, just look at a product and understand if it was any of these considerations were even contemplated at all. And on the consumer side of things, it kind of across the board hasn't been considered. And that's where you see such a great difference between, how our products perform versus any other product out there. It's just night and day because of some of those considerations.
I have a question. May I ask, Jared?
Yes, sir.
How have you been able to really adapt this to the healthcare world in terms of hospitals and clinics and doctors' offices, given that this is really, I think, immense interest to what we're doing and to our community? Could you address that, Wes? That would be great.
Yeah, so we, in our professional line of devices, I mentioned that we've made them, small and easy to deploy. So, when it comes to, acute care facilities or situations where our products are patient facing, it makes them really easy to deploy, whether it be on a tabletop, whether it's a wall mounting, or whether it's mounting to, another surface. For example, all of our Pro product is VESA mountable. So anywhere where you might mount a monitor, you could mount our device. And so, that in combination with it being easy to use, but also touchless. So to operate our device, you actually don't ever have to touch it. And so we use a hand gesture to open and close the device, but it allows you to, put a PhoneSoap device in your facility without it worrying about it becoming a vector for transmission itself. And it's easy enough to use that it's both, we've seen it be deployed as a patient-facing device where it's in waiting rooms where patients can use it on their personal devices, but also staff-facing where staff can use it on their personal devices, so they're not, taking work home with them, and the inverse, bringing home to work with them, where obviously we don't want that in a hospital setting. So, it's kind of, half of the battle is just compliance and getting people to use it. It's kind of, I think of it, I grew up in Southern California, next to Disneyland, and Disneyland has this interesting philosophy of putting, if you've been to Disneyland, you know that they put garbage cans everywhere. And that is one of the tools, it's a low tech thing, a garbage can, but they put them everywhere. And because they're everywhere, they're really convenient to use. And when they're convenient to use, people use them, and it helps keep their parks clean and an enjoyable environment. And so we look at, our devices as kind of something so easy to use and so easy to deploy that it can be like that garbage can at Disneyland in a facility where it can go in a lot of places. It's not expensive compared to, other medical equipment, but yeah, it's really effective. And so, as you look at healthcare in places like that, it's not just our efficacy, and it's not just our, consistency in cleaning, but it's our ability to easily deploy it into a facility. I think that makes it such a good solution.
Is it fair to think that at some point these may be in OR rooms to sterilize surgical equipment, or in emergency rooms, or is that a potential application for it?
Yeah, eventually I think that the technology has the ability to, live in a setting like that. We certainly are looking at increasing our efficacy and our in the trackability of complex objects like that. And so at some point in the future, I do see that happening. What we're focused on right now really are what we consider necessary low-hanging fruit for facilities. Obviously, hospital-acquired infections are a thing, and how are things getting transmitted from one patient in one room to another, and as more and more facilities are using shared use mobile devices, whether it be iPhones or Voceras or what have you, as those objects are going from room to room, we're focused on those communication devices that are often touched. And once, and we've developed some really great technology for that. For example, on the software side, keeping track of which of those devices have been disinfected, for example. Right now, that's a very manual process, but our system can keep track of, if your facility deploys 10 iPhones in a nursing station, well, we can keep track of which ones have been disinfected and when, and report that to the nurse or the infection preventionist, and they can know that, okay, as far as hospital acquired infections go, we know that these phones are being disinfected when they, every time they leave a room or after every shift or whatever the protocol is in that facility. So we're focused on that right now, but in the future, obviously that has the ability to expand into other areas of a facility. I would imagine so.
I'll just make one more comment. Having come from a family, 4 generations of doctors, I remember my father always having the stethoscope around his neck and then putting it to our chest to take a deep breath in other patients. Is this something that at some point, I would think, with what has really kind of set the mindset to keep everything sterile and not touch and not hug. Is this something where a UV, phone soap could have that kind of use?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of UV and what it's was capable of, and also what what its limitations are. UV has the ability to really disinfect very consistently and very well hard non-porous surfaces. So obviously think of what the material that stethoscopes are made of. Phones. I'll let your imagination do the work, but hard non-porous surfaces, in any place can be disinfected really well with UV light. Limitations include fabrics, and those can create lots of shadows. And back to Evan's analogy of whatever the light touches, it disinfects. And fabrics, that's a lot more difficult. Not that it doesn't work. I mean, there's been lots of studies this year that show that UV is effective in disinfecting to a certain degree masks, which are porous and fabric. So on our side, as far as the development of products go, that's a lot more difficult to simulate and difficult to test very thoroughly. And so we're cautious when it comes to UV and fabrics. But when it comes to UV and how it can be applied to disinfect hard non-porous surfaces, we have great confidence there. And so in a facility, we're looking towards, in the future, all hard non-porous surfaces that could benefit from UV. Quick question I see on the chat bar is, are there devices coming for iPads? Yes, we have devices that disinfect iPads as well, pro devices and consumer devices. So anything, we've got devices that disinfect one phone at a time in your house to multiple phones and iPads in a professional setting as well.
And if I can just, I'll add a couple of comments on the healthcare side. I've been working with Wes and Dan for about the last 6 years, really more in the background, but, I come from an infectious disease diagnostics background. And so what we've seen is with the deploying of these devices, it's really having something that can less charging in the healthcare scenario and more about being able to disinfect, right? So UV being a part of a protocol. And as Wes mentioned, it's important to monitor compliance, just like hand hygiene. We've seen technology emerge in that area, but tying device hygiene to hand hygiene whenever you can, where these are deployed, really what it supports and is an increasingly needed safety culture. So the perception combined with the efficacy is incredibly important. But we're having conversations with folks that are, doing clinical trials, and whether it be bring your own device or deployed by institutions. We're working with folks that have customer facing, wearable as a step down from the hospital, where they want to get them on technology that's going to help guide their therapy or monitor it. We've talked the last couple of days about apps, and apps reside on devices. And so once again, especially in healthcare and with the pathogens that reside in healthcare, whether it be, very resistant gram-negative pathogens throughout the world, gram-positives, viruses, they don't really care who they victimize, right? And so when these, as many have called Trojan horses from the standpoint of devices, they do amazing things to help better our world, help, enable healthcare. But with it, it's just the mindfulness of knowing that they can be vectors. And as we kind of jokingly say, and Wes said earlier, that third hand that you never clean. And so really to bring kind of all this together, it's really, we're part of the solution. We're part of the bundle. We've had people get incredible efficacy. We've had people that have had a phone soap they bought years ago that report to us that they brought it out during the pandemic and use it every single day. And we're certainly, inundated, and we're happy to bring the devices we have planned for healthcare, but we're really happy to work and partner with folks like you to identify the unmet needs that are out there, all providing something that's efficacious and safe serve basically the global demand of serving patients. So any other questions or anything? I think we have a minute left. Anything else, Ransel, that you've seen from a chat or anywhere else? Any other questions from anybody?
No, I think that this has been one of the more interesting. They've all been interesting, but this one, because I think, it's something, as you say, that is near and dear to all of us. We touch our phones. I don't know. I read somewhere how many times a day, but it's numerous. Let me ask you one closing question. What's the biggest misconception of UV? I'd love to hear if there is one that is out there that can be debunked in this time. And don't worry about the minute. You guys have the panel, so I'd love to get some, and maybe that's to Evan or Wes, but I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I can take this one. It's hard to sort through a lot of the misconceptions that people have, but to me, the biggest one is that that any surface can be disinfected. Like Wes mentioned, like fabric. So anything that is fabric based, or anything that has a lot of pores in it, you can't get the same reduction. Even a dollar bill, I mean, we've done some testing on dollar bills and still been able to get like 4 log reduction and stuff like that, but it's harder and it takes a lot more light. And I would say the second misconception is that all UV light is created equal, and it's just not. It's just because something says UV doesn't mean that it's the right wavelength. And I gave that example of Walmart distributing a device that was only in the UVA spectrum, and which is, it's hard because it doesn't look any different from proper devices when it comes out of the chamber. And so making sure that people understand that not all UV light is the same, I think, is probably the biggest misconception.
Wes, do you want to add anything, or a couple of examples that I think are incredible? You look at this year where what we've seen with sanitizers, right? Where then many of them, they pull an appropriate mask that has, the layers needed and efficacy, and then, enter in a solution like UVC that people are yearning towards, right? Versus chemical disinfection for whatever reason. And it is about trust. And if you look at the nature of this call, it's really about vetting, certainly us or any UVC vendor. So once you identify the need for it, to provide a solution in whatever vertical you're in, is then making sure it works. And with some of the interventions that are out there to really monitor effectiveness, or looking at third-party studies or things like that, that's really a hallmark of the integrity of our people and our brand, that you should attach that scrutiny to anybody. We're not going to make a UV robot today. So even if you're looking at UVC robots, is making sure that you identify the merits of those as well, so that you can trust.
That's great. Well, this has been fascinating, and certainly a welcomed, I think, instrument, and certainly aid to combating what really has been a horrible situation with the pandemic and the fear of being infected or infection spreading. So I take my hat off to all of you, and I think that you have a great future in front of you, and proud to be one that is able to help you in any way we can. So with that, I'd like to basically close out the summit. It's been a great 2 days. We certainly have had incredible sponsors and speakers. The speakers have been phenomenal. The tweets and the, I would say, emails that I have gotten have flooded us with nothing but compliments and congrats. So I think that really goes to everybody and to Memorial Sloan. And I'd like to turn it over to Ghassan for some closing remarks as well.
Well, thanks so much, Ransel. And I second all what you said. This is like mind-blowing, to say the least. And this is, however, if anything, it really gives us a very important answer that we all really are eager to kind of like not only hear, but also to live and witness, which is how can we bridge people together. This is really like the whole world around talk about what's better for humanity and what's better for patients. And if anything, really, we went through a lot of great trips during the last 2 days, and we learned a lot. We connected with many of you, and if anything, really, we have seen the innovation really at its best. I don't want to exclude any specific, panel or panelists, because they all did amazingly well. But nonetheless, some of them that really jumped to mind, and I'm sure we all are talking about it, even were off, like the presentation by Dr. Al-Hashmi on NEOM was like above and beyond. And I have to say that also Mr. Cameras, Rob, really with his really thinking out of the box, how can you bring peace through the taking care of people and through the normalization of the efforts, really were exemplary. But with this said, I again thank Ransel quite a bit for welcoming and thanking Memorial. It's really our great honor and pleasure. A special thanks really come for the Memorial family, and specifically to Dr. Klaus Jensen, who really again featured the incredible opportunities that we're bringing on the new digital transformation that he spoke plenty about in the two panels yesterday and the keynote one today. And really, I'm very grateful for him, Dr. Jensen, and his team for all the incredible support that we have received, which was not really at all easy. If anything, above and beyond, thanks for the person who is behind it all, Mr. Palmucci and his team. Sam has really been responsible for really having you get this very smooth transition and very successful meeting. Sam, great applause for you, and thank you so much for all of your efforts. And with this said, again, we very much look forward to connect again. And this relationship with Ransel at Memorial has been running for almost 7, if not now, we're coming to the 8th year. And really, I would say that the future will hopefully evolve for further interaction. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ghassan. And before we sign off, Sam, I'd like to thank you personally as well. You have been just brilliant. And Jolene, you have been wonderful. And without you, this really would not have happened. And we are looking forward, hopefully next year, to being live again back in New York at the Union League Club. It will be September 20 and 21 in conjunction with Unga, who continually supports us. And I think that we've already landed on a theme. It will be, and I hope this is a very appropriate one, healthcare after COVID, the next wave of innovation and investments. And COVID will come to an end at some point, and whether it does or not, it will always be appropriate, because whatever we do, it will be after what we've learned and been through. So thank you all. My heartfelt thanks to everybody again, and hope to see you next September in New York. Take care.
We do need more Americans doing business in the Middle East. We need more two-way trade and investment. We need more small and medium-sized enterprises involved. I think they're addressing all the issues, and I think that they recognize here that the larger benefit is greater understanding and looking at the positive side of the Middle East, the good things that are happening, all the people that are oriented toward the future already. And you can't spend all your time in life just to stop bad things from happening or reacting when they do. You got to spend some time trying to make good things happen. That's what this conference is about, and I think it's good.